Hi, this is Ty Adronis with TestPilotRC for Videomaker Magazine. And this is how to get some really good drone shots. And I'm using RealFlight 6.5 here, so you can see my controller down there on the bottom right. And on the top right, you can see the multicopter we're going to be using with it, which is a Gaui 330X, kind of similar to the Phantom. Let's go ahead and get up in the air and check it out. Alright, so first what we're going to do is we're going to do a standard establishing shot, which kind of mimics a crane. So we're going to start off way far back though, and so let's back it up. Now normally I would have these windows reversed to where my FPV is in the top right, but I really want you to see the camera angle, and keep in mind this has no gimbal on it. This is just a camera stuck to the nose of the aircraft, so you're going to be able to see all the twitching of the aircraft and whatnot. Should tell you just how important a stabilized gimbal really is. So we're going to start off high above the airfield, and we're going to make those buildings our subject, and we're just going to come in really nice and slow and see how the controls, we're just barely touching them. Light touch is what's really important. Okay, so this is our first run through. Let's go ahead and back up and do a really good one. That can show you just how bad it is when you get going way too fast. The things you really want to keep in mind are two words: slow and stable. Okay, so you really want to move as slow as possible when you're doing stuff, and you can see that drastic moves on the sticks really can get you into trouble. So let's just start off really high and come in really nice and slow on that control tower. We're going to make that our subject. So another little setup here. Let's go ahead and back it up. Now we do have the wind turned on, so you can see how it's going to affect the multicopter throughout this whole thing. And so we're backing up, and that looks pretty good. Also, we have no tilt control on the camera. It's just pointed straight forward. So you're just going to see every little movement that the multicopter makes, which is why it's a really bad idea to just stick something on there. Okay, so we're starting our move. We've just tilted forward slightly, and we're just letting the momentum carry us all the way up. And now we're pulling back to start slowing ourselves down. And we're coming in really nice and slow, doing a slight drop down. We're going to end up right on the glass. And you can see on the sticks, we're not even really touching anything. We're just letting that momentum carry us in. And the only input we're really giving the sticks is to just correct and slow down. Okay, so we got that shot. So that's your standard crane style move, where you're just going to come right in on something or slide up on it. For the next one, let's go ahead and try a orbit by, which is where we kind of do a half orbit as we fly by something. So we're going to pass just on the right side here, and we're going to use the yaw on the left stick to spin us around and keep the glass right in focus. And we're just going to continue it back and up. And you can see just all really slight movements on the sticks. Maintain a really light touch on those sticks. Okay, so that was the orbit by. And then we're going to come up, and I think we're going to try, let's do a side slide. We're going to go from right to left. And for this first one, we're going to try it nice and close. We may end up a little too close, but let's give it a shot anyway. And so what we do is we hold position, and we just start the movement over to the left, and then we use our yaw to keep that camera pointed at a 90-degree angle from our movement. And here we go, a nice side slide dolly style move. But you know what, I think we got a little bit close, so let's go ahead and pull it back, and we'll do one from out where the runway is. So we'll line up with the runway here and just go right down the runway and end up on the right side of the buildings again. Again, really small movements. Even when I'm moving fast, you can see that the sticks really aren't moving all that much. So maintain that light touch on your sticks. It's really important. You know what, this seems like it's a little too far away. Let's go ahead and set up a little closer. Now this is going to be a fairly long flight that I'm showing you here with all the camera moves. In reality, we probably have to use 2 or even 3 batteries to do all these moves, because these guys don't last very long. But moving in a little closer. Alright, that looks good. Let's drop it down a little bit. And lining up. Okay, so we're going to start our move to the left as soon as we get lined up here. And there we go, we're starting our tilt. Come on. And trying to keep it from moving around, trying to maintain this hover. Okay, so we're starting to left, we're going back a little bit. So we're just going to be correcting just to keep us on track and try to move this nice and slow across. You can see how important a gimbal is because you're always making tiny corrections, and so your multicopter is always tilting. Okay, so there we went. Notice we moved through the shot. You don't want to start on the buildings and end on the buildings. Move through the shot so that when you edit it together, you have some handles to play around with. Because you never know exactly where you're going to cut it, especially when you're shooting. So always shoot a little bit longer in the beginning and a little bit longer in the end. So let's go ahead and do a what are we going to do here? Let's try to do an orbit. Yeah, let's do an orbit next. And we're setting up here. You know what? I'm not liking this one. It's kind of football shaped, not really circular. The idea with an orbit is you want to keep a really steady movement on your yaw. And you just want to be doing all your correction on the right stick. You want to hold your altitude as best you can and do all your movement on the right stick. And these are very difficult. It's probably going to take me a couple of tries here, and you can see all the corrections we're doing on that right stick to maintain our distance and speed from our subject. This one's not quite right either. We're drifting too far away. And you know what? I don't really want to be too terribly close to the subject. We want to keep a good frame on our object, following our rules of thirds and all that stuff like we do with normal video. And let's go ahead and set up on this side of it and try to do a full orbit here. Okay, this looks like a pretty good framing, so here we go. Starting our orbit, we're keeping it in frame. Again, a gimbal is really, really important because you're constantly making tiny little corrections to your right stick, and that's changing how your multicopter is tilting. And notice it's all really tiny movements. I can't emphasize it enough. So we're still orbiting around. Now if we had a gimbal, this would be nice level video. You wouldn't get any of this gyration around. But even so, you can see how smooth that we're trying to fly it. Alright, so that was a really good orbit. We're happy with that. Let's go ahead and set up and do a fly through. Now what we're going to do is we're going to fly through the gap between the control tower and the trees. And you can see here how FPV is really important, because if you look up in the upper right window, you can see that it'll be really hard to maintain a depth perception on that tiny little multicopter doing this big long flight. So here we go. We're going to go really close to the roof, and we're going to fly through that gap between the trees and the control tower. And there we go. And you can see we also kind of lose it because we end up flying behind the control tower here. So FPV is really important functionality to have, but you don't want to use goggles with a multicopter because you want to be able to see the object so you can make sure it doesn't hit any, telephone wires or whatever. Now let's go ahead and put a couple of moves together. We'll do a crane move of going up. Let's get behind the building so that we can review the view the airfield as a reveal. So we're going to come up from behind the control tower, reveal the airfield, and then swoop down and kind of do a orbit by of the landing strip to reveal the buildings again. So even for this setup, because it's really close proximity, we're going to want to get really nice and close to the building. And so you don't want to be moving fast on your approach for setup, because then you have to correct fast and you may flip your multicopter over and crash it into the roof. Any way it goes, you never want to risk your equipment. So let's get it nice and close here. And we're going to fly through the shot, which means even though we want this logo in the shot for the real flight school, we're going to start off below it. So let's move up through it, up over the control tower, come down over the airfield. Notice really tiny movements on the stick. And now let's start our orbit by. Oh, that's beautiful. Okay. Now if we had a gimbal, that would have been so smooth it would be like butter. Now for the most important maneuver of all, landing your aircraft and making sure that it comes down safe. You don't want to damage any of your equipment. So again, really, really tiny movements. Combining all of these moves in different ways is really how you're going to get all your shots with a multicopter. This has been Ty Adranis with TestPilotRC for Videomaker Magazine.